Hello, you beautiful, wonderful, spectacular people. There's a stray here and it is bugging me, but oh well. Today is, what is that, my 6th 31 Days of Halloween recap video. Yikes! I know at this point it's like, why didn't you just do the last 3 in one big video? That video would have gone like for like an hour and a half. And people barely even want to watch a 30-minute video. They're sitting down for that. Anyway, in today's video, I am recapping films 150 to 179 from my 31 Days of Halloween marathon. Honestly, I said it in another recap video. Doing these recap videos is harder than doing the actual marathon. And I get so out of breath. And oh my god, I struggle so much with these names. And based on what the first film I'm talking about today is, I imagine that's going to happen again. So let us just jump right into the recap. Film number 150 is Possession, a 1981 French-German psychological horror drama film directed by a name I am about to struggle to pronounce, Andrzej Zulawski? I don't know. But written by that person and Frederick Tutton. See, that name was a lot easier. The other one. No. See, this is why I wish I had the power of omnilingualism to speak every language in the world. Would make my job so much easier. Anyway, the plot follows the relationship between an international spy and his wife, who begins exhibiting increasingly disturbing behavior after asking him for a divorce. This and Eraserhead belong together. If you're in that niche of people who have seen this and understand all its metaphors without having to go on Google, then I commend you. Only specific people I feel will enjoy this film, let alone understand it. I sadly am not in that niche. I did not enjoy it, and I most certainly didn't understand it. For me, it was just 2 insane hours of more screaming than I can handle. I will commend the actors on their performances, however, because it takes someone with immense talent to sell performances like this from a script that for some would be unintelligible. Number 151, The Possession of Hannah Grace, also known as Cadaver, a 2018 American supernatural horror film directed by Diederik van Rogen and written by Brian Sieve, I think. It follows a former policewoman who encounters the supernatural while working in a morgue. It's dull and too many tropes. A popular theme among horror films that is becoming so popular it's losing all meaning is making the main antagonist of the film someone suffering from mental instability or addiction or trauma, making them question themselves in regards to the events around them and making those around them never believe what they're saying. I have lost count of how many horror films do this, and I'm honestly sick of it. For once, I wish more films would be like Poltergeist. In that film, the daughter tells her mom she's talking to invisible people and mom believes her. Even more so when she sees it herself. She shows her husband and he believes it straight away too. I'm getting tired of these horror films where everyone is ignorant and our leads are unreliable at their words. I'm tired of it. It's funny how uneventful this film is, given that stuff does happen. It's never anything interesting or anything that creates a captivating story. It focuses far more on talking about the lead's addiction and her personal trauma than it deals with Hannah Grace. Number 152, The Prodigy, a 2019 American-Canadian horror film directed by Nicholas McCarthy and written by Jeff Buhler. The plot centers around a child whose disturbing behavior signals that an evil, possibly supernatural being has taken control of him, forcing his parents to investigate whether sinister forces are involved. Overall, I quite enjoyed this. I do feel as though I've seen this kind of story using reincarnation before, but I think this one had a few fresh bits to it. While I liked it, I felt it was missing a lot of oomph and just needed something more to it to really elevate it, because it didn't feel all that effective. Number 153, Psycho, a 1960 American psychological horror film directed by Alfred Hitchcock with a screenplay by Joseph Stefano, based on the 1959 novel of the same name by Robert Bloch. A Phoenix secretary embezzles $40,000 from her employer's client, goes on the run and checks into a remote motel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. It's been years since I've seen this film, and I gotta say that watching it again after all these years, I'm less impressed by it. A lot of the film feels like a procedural drama as it follows the investigation in the missing characters. I still love the conclusion though, and how it all plays out. It's a great reveal, and I love when the psychiatrist explains it all and more is revealed about Norman. Number 154, Psycho 2, a 1983 American slasher film directed by Richard Franklin and written by Tom Holland. It's a sequel to the 1960 film and second entry in the Psycho series. Set 22 years after the first film, it follows Norman Bates after he is released from the mental institution and returns to the house and Bates Motel to continue a normal life. However, his troubled past continues to haunt him. Here's probably a blasphemous unpopular opinion, but I enjoyed this way more than the original, and I'm not sure I've said that before about a film. I went into this expecting utter garbage. I was anticipating it. After all, making sequels to classics doesn't usually go over very well. But I actually love this film. I love the story, it makes complete sense. I love watching Norman's mental stability slowly slipping away. I love how characters outside of him are waging a war over his sanity just as he is fighting one internally. I was hooked waiting to see how it would all unravel. It's more brutal than the original, and those brutal moments come so suddenly and are so in your face that they are very effective and took me by surprise, but in a good way. They got strong reactions from me, which is something I want when watching horror films. I didn't feel the final twist was necessary or a smart idea to have in the film, but I'm not going to complain about it either because I had such a fun time with this film, which I was not expecting. Number 155, Psycho 3, a 1986 American slasher film directed by Anthony Perkins and written by Charles Edward Pogue. It's the third film in the Psycho film series, and in it Norman Bates falls in love with a fallen nun who stays at the Bates Motel alongside a drifter and a curious reporter. Meanwhile, Mother is still watching. Can't say I enjoyed this one very much. It felt like Perkins was trying too hard to replicate filming styles from the original Psycho and other films that most of it didn't go together. There was so much unnecessary religious iconography in this film and one too many side characters and plots that had no real purpose being there. Then they decide to switch up Norman's backstory even more, making it now convoluted. Just not an entertaining film, sadly. Number 156, Bates Motel, a 1987 American made-for-television drama horror film written and directed by Richard Rothstein and is a spin-off of the Psycho film series. A mentally disturbed man who roomed with the late Norman Bates at the state lunatic asylum inherits the legendary Bates Motel after the death of Norman and tries to fix it up to make it a respectable business. Oh no. No. What in the holy heck was this? The world's most bizarre spin-off. First it paints Norman as a saint, then it ignores the sequels, and after that it becomes this happy, cheerful, comedic TV movie about dreams coming true and rebuilding and dodgy bank employees that then suddenly focuses on a random character contemplating suicide who is visited by 20 ghosts of high school students who killed themselves telling her not to do it. Drama film? Yes. Horror film? Not in any way, shape, or form. Though it definitely feels like the TV movie it is. God, even the music was so Lifetime. This was the crazy crap I expected from the sequel. This film was intended to be a pilot for a TV spin-off, but it performed so poorly they axed the idea. I can see why it did so badly. Most Lifetime feel-good film I've watched all month of October. When I watch a horror film, I shouldn't feel good. Laurie Petty, how could you? Number 157, Psycho 4: The Beginning, a 1990 American made-for-television horror film directed by Mick Garris and written by Joseph Stefano. It's the fourth installment in the Psycho film series, and in it Norman Bates recalls his childhood with his abusive mother while fearing his unborn child will inherit his split personality disorder. Honestly, the performances are good, but the dialogue for the flashbacks are insane. This film really goes over the top with Norman's backstory with his mother. It exaggerates so much and ignores most of what was established in the original film. On top of that, it seems to completely ignore the sequels for the sake of creating the elaborate backstory. Ignoring the sequels is one thing. Ignoring the original is so much worse. The flashbacks take place in the 40s and 50s, but there has been very little done to make those scenes feel as though they take place in the 40s or 50s. There were some nods here and there, but mostly they feel no different to the present timeline of the story. For someone who should be somewhat mentally stable according to the story, Norman appears more psycho than ever. This just wasn't an enjoyable film at all, too all over the place. The psychiatrist in this film claims to be the same one who diagnosed Norman all those years ago, but he has a completely different name and isn't old enough at all. Not to mention the writing for him is terrible. He's written as a sexist jerk who doesn't know anything about psychology, and the writing for him ignores everything established psychologically for Norman in the first film. Also, the statement saying women don't kill their mothers was just a stupid and factually incorrect statement to have him state. This film is truly stupid. Maybe Stephen King's favourite sequel, but it sure ain't mine. Number 158, Psycho, a 1998 American horror film directed by Gus Van Sant with a screenplay by Joseph Stefano. It's a remake of the 1960 film, and in it an embezzler arrives at an old motel run by an insane killer named Norman Bates. Same opening, same transitions, same font, same typing, even the dialogue is majoritively the same. It's a shot-for-shot remake, mostly just with bad performances. The way the dialogue is delivered is horrendous, and using identical dialogue from a 1960 film for a 1999 film does not work. How many people in 99 were talking about broiling things? Certain words, certain discussions from the original reflected the time period, so having them in the remake feels like the entire film isn't aware of what year it is. Even the score doesn't work in this version. This entire film feels like that kid in class who stole their entire essay from the internet, then changed a couple of words and handed it in to the teacher, passing it off as their own. Know what happens to those kids? They get big fat Fs, which is what the film deserves. Its biggest issue is that it took a good script and made it boring as hell. Number 159, Puppet Master. We are about to dive into it for real. A 1989 American horror film directed by David Schmoller and written by Schmoller and Kenneth J. Hall. In it, psychics find themselves plotted against by a former colleague who committed suicide after discovering animated murderous puppets. Not half bad. I did, however, find it hard to connect the opening of the film to the rest of the events that follow, but that was my own fault as I must have looked away and both times missed the screen indicating the timeline. Had I seen this, the film would have made much more sense. What's interesting is that after all these years and finally watching this, what I've learned is that the dolls aren't evil. In fact, most of what they do in this film isn't even on screen. This film isn't scary or disturbing and has no shock value, nor does it make me confront uncomfortable subjects. Aside from Leech Woman, I really don't know what makes this film a horror film. It feels more like another adaptation of 10 Little Indians. I do think it's funny how there's only one thing in my entire life I've ever heard speak about Bodega Bay. Now suddenly I've seen it mentioned in 2 movies in the month of October. That's weird. Number 160, Puppet Master 2, a 1990 American direct-to-video horror film directed by Dave Allen and written by David Pabian. It's the second film in the Puppet Master franchise, and in it sees paranormal investigators who are terrorized by the animate creatures of an undead puppeteer. While this one feels more in the horror genre than the first, I enjoyed it even less than the first. Toulon in the first film treated his puppets with such love and kindness. He saw them as his children, and in this version he treats them like crap and takes advantage of their love for him. It's changes like this I don't enjoy. On top of that, they killed the only puppet that I found creepy. I really wish the puppets could speak, might actually help make them creepier. Number 161, Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge, a 1991 American direct-to-video horror film directed by David DeCoteau and written by Charles Bansi, Courtney Jr. and David Schmoller. It's the third film in the Puppet Master franchise and a prequel to the 1989 film. A puppeteer's ability to bring inanimate objects to life attracts the attention of the Nazis during World War II. Okay, now this one I enjoyed. Great prequel, great backstory to Toulon, depicts a far better relationship between him and his puppets. I love that each puppet is given a backstory. I love that they bring back Leech Woman and give her more significance on top of that. Seeing the puppets having a hatred for Nazis and attacking when Toulon and his wife are under attack is really great, and again shows the strong bond between Puppet Master and puppet. Number 162, Puppet Master 4, a 1993 American direct-to-video action horror film directed by Jeff Burr and written by Charles Band, Douglas Arniakowski, Stephen E. Carr, Joe Duffy, Todd Henschel, Keith S. Payson, and David Schmoller. It's the 4th film in the Puppet Master franchise and a sequel to the 1990 film. A young scientist and his friends, upon being attacked by demons, are protected by a gang of animated puppets. This one went way out of the box and went rather nuts, and that's saying a lot considering what the series is. It feels so far removed from what we've seen so far, and it seems to ignore the sequel. I can't keep up, but I just found it hard to pay attention to this one. Puppets definitely aren't evil, that's for sure. Number 163, Puppet Master 5, The Final Chapter, a 1994 American direct-to-video horror film directed by Jeff Burr and written by Douglas Arniakowski, Stephen E. Carr, Joe Duffy, Todd Henschler, Keith S. Payson, and David Schmoller. It's the 5th film in the Puppet Master franchise and was intended to be the last. In it, the puppets battle their most powerful enemy yet as they protect their new master from the demon god that created the secret of life. I could not focus on this film and my brain switched off. I virtually have no idea what happened. The whole demon storyline just completely loses me and looks hilarious, but I do admit I kind of love the puppets. They're little heroes, but not moral heroes, so I guess they're anti-heroes. They kick butt and are pretty fun, and I'm getting used to the fact they don't speak, but due to me zoning out so much, I can't rate this film, which would be unfair to try, so when I did watch it, I didn't end up rating it. Number 164, Curse of the Puppet Master, a 1998 American direct-to-video horror film directed by David DeCoteau and written by Benjamin Carr and David Schmoller. It's the 6th film in the Puppet Master franchise and a standalone sequel that revived the series. In it, a scientist attempts to master the art of transferring people's souls into puppets. Not a fan of standalone sequels. We don't know what happened after the last film, how the puppets came to their new owner. It all just seems like a missed opportunity, especially due to being so removed from everything else in the series. Puppets felt like they had a smaller role in this, but I did enjoy seeing them brutally murder a potential rapist, so that was fun. Go puppets! Music has also really grown on me, though some of the score at times reminds me of The Shadow. Number 165, Retro Puppet Master, a 1999 American direct-to-video horror film directed by David DeCoteau and written by Charles Band, Benjamin Carr, and David Schmoller. It's the 7th film in the Puppet Master franchise and is a prequel to the 1991 film. In the late 19th century, an ancient Egyptian sorcerer discovers the art of transferring the souls of the dead into inanimate objects. Oh great! A prequel that completely ignores and contradicts everything established in the other films. According to what was seen in other films, this film completely changed the history of the puppets, completely changed the time and place of Toulon learning how to bring the puppets to life, which also changes how that story connects to his wife. On top of that, the acting, especially from young Toulon, was absolutely dreadful, cringeworthy to say the least. Acting regarding his friends, equally dreadful. The demon worshippers, also bad acting, plus in regards to them, it's the job of one of them to just repeat everything one of the other guys says, which was very annoying and bad writing. That's just lazy. And they did it for a couple human characters too. Is continuity so much to ask for in a franchise? Number 166, Puppet Master: The Legacy, a 2003 American direct-to-DVD horror film directed by Charles Band and written by C. Courtney Joyner and David Schmoller. It's the 8th film in the Puppet Master franchise and a sequel to the 1994 film. In it, Peter Hertz, who was rescued from the Nazis as a child by André Toulon in the 1940s, is now an old man and has inherited the puppets. He is pursued by an assassin who forces him to tell her the entire history of Toulon and the puppets. Okay, now this film is by far the most stupid. I hate franchises that do this. They did the same thing with the Sleepaway Camp series. They just released this random movie that isn't a movie at all. It's just taking footage from all the other films and put them into one new film and call it a film. But it's more like a 1-hour recap of the franchise. It's not an actual film. What's even more stupid is there is some form of a story going on in between all this, but it's stupid because A, it's boring, and B, you can't combine footage and events from every single film into one because all of the scenes they use literally cancel each other out and contradict everything the other scene said. No one thought this through at all. Number 167, Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys, a 2005 American non-canon crossover horror film directed by Ted Nicolai and written by Courtney Joyner, David S. Goyer, and David Schmoller. It's another film in the Puppet Master franchise and is the 3rd film in the Demonic Toys franchise. In it, a group of toy makers seek to use André Toulon's formula, now in the hands of Toulon's great-nephew, Robert, to give life to a line of killer toys that they plan to unleash on Christmas Eve. Let's face it, demon toys or not, this is a Christmas movie. I'd have been better watching this in December. It's absolutely insane and super low budget, but so far the plot and sequence of events made far more sense than the last few movies I'd seen. Of course, the actual plot has no connection to the other Puppet Master movies except for one character name and the puppets, of course. After all, it even says it's non-canon, so at least you know this going in, but at least it's watchable. Number 168, Puppet Master Axis of Evil, a 2010 American horror film directed by David DeCoteau and written by Charles Band and August White. It's the 9th official entry in the Puppet Master franchise, and in it during the Second World War, a young man with the help of some animated puppets must stop the Nazis who attacked his family and kidnapped his girlfriend. This film follows the events of the opening of the first film, which actually doesn't work and once again cancels out everything that came after it, but minus timeline issues, it's actually a good film. Watching the puppets taking down Nazi bastards is always fun, though I think we saw more Nazis and Japanese people doing shady stuff than we saw of the puppets. I would have loved to see more of the puppets fighting Nazis. Nevertheless, it's one of the better executed films. Number 169, Puppet Master X or 10, Axis Rising, a 2012 American action horror film directed by Charles Band and written by Band and Shane Bitterling. It's the 10th entry in the Puppet Master franchise, and in it Danny and Beth must battle the Nazis after they use the puppet's life-giving serum to create a race of immortal soldiers as well as some Nazi puppets. And then this happened. Maybe a sequel to the previous film and follows just hours later, but it's an entirely new cast, and the cast isn't good and the plot has become even more absurd again. Every time this series takes one step forward, it takes 20 steps back. It's giving me whiplash. Finding it really hard to enjoy this one, but regardless of what I may think of these films, I do like the puppets themselves, and when they finally get their chance to shine, I am super happy. Leech Woman was kicking some ass this time around. It was nice. I gotta say, Puppet Cat Fight made it totally worth watching. Number 170, Puppet Master Axis Termination, a 2017 American horror film directed by Charles Band and written by Band and Roger Barron. It's the 11th film in the Puppet Master franchise, and in it we find a heroic band of lethal puppets joining forces with a secret team of allied operatives, all masters of psychic powers, as they face off together against a new bunch of evil Nazi adversaries and their collection of vicious Axis puppets in a showdown that will decide the future of the free world. This one was just bad. Utterly ridiculous storyline, the most ridiculous of the series, and that's saying a lot. Terrible German accents, and the puppets, the main selling point of the franchise, barely freaking did anything. What an absolute waste of time. Not to mention some truly horrible special effects. Amazing how the further we go into the present with these films, the worse the effects get. Number 171, Puppet Master, The Littlest Reich, a 2018 American horror comedy film directed by Sonny Laguna and Tommy Wickland with a screenplay by S. Craig Zeller. It's the 12th entry in the Puppet Master franchise and a reboot of the series. All hell breaks loose when a strange force animates the puppets up for auction at a convention, setting them on a bloody killing spree that's motivated by an evil as old as time. Look, there are good performances, it's well made and directed, and it has really good effects, but I don't like the new look of the puppets. I don't like that instead of being anti-heroes who kick Nazi ass, they're now little Nazi puppets going around brutally murdering Jews, gays, and well, basically any minority. There are some great gruesome moments, but the problem is once it starts, it is non-stop. It is just one bombastic, gruesome moment after the next, and it doesn't discriminate or hold back on how gruesome it is. But it gets very boring very quickly because there's no suspense, there's no build-up. It's just a tidal wave of blood, and there's nothing interesting about that. To make it worse, this is all happening to a large number of characters who we don't know or care about, so it really doesn't matter to the viewer if they die or not. I get wanting the puppets to be the villains, but having watched these films now, I prefer them as immoral anti-heroes. The beauty in that was you never knew when they might turn on you. Number 172, Quarantine, a 2008 American found footage horror film directed by John Eric Dowdle with a screenplay by John Eric Dowdle and Drew Dowdle, and is a remake of the Spanish film REC or REC or however you want to say it, either way it's short for recording. A television reporter and her cameraman are trapped inside a building quarantined by the CDC after the outbreak of a mysterious virus which turns humans into bloodthirsty killers. I didn't think this was terrible and it is easy to follow, but with everyone screaming over each other, it gets a bit annoying. Now, Jennifer Carpenter plays hysterical better than anyone, but after the first 10 minutes of her being hysterical, it gets real old real quick, and that's really what the rest of the movie contains. Carpenter being hysterical. Would have liked something more to it than that. Surprisingly, I did like the look of it considering it's found footage and it was well made. It's just boring and annoying. Number 173, Quarantine 2 Terminal, a 2011 American film written and directed by John Pogue and is a sequel to the 2008 film. A plane is taken over by a mysterious virus. When the plane lands, it's placed under quarantine. Now a group of survivors must band together to survive the quarantine. I actually like this a bit more than the first one. The story is a bit more interesting, less hysterical screaming. It ties to the first very well, and I like that this one gave me answers I wanted, but be careful what you wish for, because in giving me answers, it took the inferred explanation from the first film and went way overboard with it to the point it was kind of laughable. So in some ways it's better, in other ways not so much, but at least there are characters who are proactive instead of just running around screaming and doing nothing to help themselves. Number 174, Rampant, also known as Chang-gwol, is a 2018 South Korean period action zombie film directed by Kim Song-hoon and written by Hwang Jo-yoon. It follows Lee Chung, the prince of Joseon, who has been taken hostage to the Qing dynasty. I picked this film for this list because it was sold to me as a horror film, but a horror film it is not. Just because a film has zombies in it doesn't automatically make it a horror film. This is more of an action comedy film. We have a character whose job it is to give nothing but comedic dialogue. For example, his last words before death are, "Don't step on shit in the street, your highness." The action is good, the story is good, and I loved how it was filmed, but don't go into this expecting a horror film like I did, because you will be very disappointed. Shame on sites that advertise it as such, but as I said, it's still a good film. I just wish they'd have picked a tone and stuck to it, because the tone of the film switched constantly. Number 175, Ravenous, a 1999 Western horror film directed by Antonia Bird and written by Ted Griffin. In a remote military outpost in the 19th century, Captain John Boyd and his regiment embark on a rescue mission which takes a dark turn when they are ambushed by a sadistic cannibal. Well, this was a wild trip. I didn't know what to expect, but it wasn't this. It's bizarre as hell, but at the same time rather good and quite interesting. Good performances for sure, but I loathe the score to this film. The style of music used for the score changes constantly, and most compositions do not sound like they go together at all, and they definitely don't sound like they belong over most of the scenes in this movie. It was just crazy. You're watching someone eating another person and suddenly the music turns comical with a banjo playing. I mean, it was bonkers. Number 176, Rosemary's Baby, a 1968 American psychological supernatural horror film based on the 1967 novel of the same name by Ira Levin. The film chronicles the story of a pregnant woman who suspects that an evil cult wants to take her baby for use in their rituals. My whole life, I've listened to people talking up this film as one of the greatest films in history, so on and so on, and now that I've finally seen it, all I can say is, this is why I don't take movie suggestions from people. I did not like one thing about this, not a single thing. I hated all the characters, everyone annoyed the hell out of me, and I thought Mia Farrow's performance was terrible. The entire film was like nails on a chalkboard for me. That 2 hours felt like a lifetime and I was begging for it to end. I'm aware this is a very unpopular opinion and I don't care. I was expecting something to wow and amaze me, not something to annoy and bore me to tears. I was expecting a film so amazing I could ignore who the director was, but nope, fuck that and fuck him. Number 177, The Russian Bride, a 2019 American horror thriller film written and directed by Michael S. Ojeda. A Russian woman travels to America with her daughter to marry a reclusive billionaire who turns out to be a psycho who sends their lives spiraling into a living hell. A lot of potential here, but it took forever to get to its point. It probably took an hour before the point of the plot was explained, and even then it seemed a bit underwhelming as very little had been going on. The last 20 minutes reminded me of Mandy. The both of them end with a cocaine-fueled murderous rampage. So similar, I'm wondering if Ojeda was inspired by Mandy. It's just a bit too much the same. There's a filter throughout the film that makes the reel feel like very low quality, and seeing how it's so present in the film, I'm thinking it was a choice and not just a result of being a low budget film. I think the performances are great and there was promise, but they were aiming for artistic and it came off as cheap, and they were hoping for impact, but it took too long and didn't feel original. Number 178, Sawney, Flesh of Man, also known as Lord of Darkness, a 2012 British horror thriller film written and directed by Ricky Wood. Scottish cannibal Sawney Bean and his murderous inbred family are responsible for over 1,000 murders over the centuries. I quite enjoyed this. It's surprisingly well filmed and has great performances. I think majority of the story is great and certainly has some disturbing imagery that gave me a bit of what I'd been craving but not getting this year. But then aspects of the plot were a letdown. I found it hard to connect the opening scene with the rest of the film. We pretty much never see this mother character, and so I don't know anything about that character. And then there is a reveal which, while I didn't see coming, it's very underwhelming. It didn't add anything to the film and felt utterly pointless to be there, and then the last few minutes just become silly. So it started off very interesting and I was impressed, but that slowly faded towards the end. Number 179, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, a 2019 horror film directed by Andre Overdahl with a screenplay by Dan and Kevin Hageman, based on the children's book series of the same name by Alvin Schwartz. On Halloween 1968, reclusive Stella and her two friends meet a mysterious drifter, Ramon, and uncover a sinister notebook of stories. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is done in the same vein as Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's horror stories for young kids and teens. It's a fun film, good premise. I love the mystery aspect and how they're trying to unravel it. That was probably my favorite part. Wasn't a fan of the scary stories chosen because they are stories and urban legends that have been used so much in films that their effect has worn off and now they're just predictable and don't hold my attention. I like that the film is open to a sequel because I would actually check out the sequel. And another recap is finally done. I do apologize that it's taken me so long to do these and that, you know, October is over and we're in November. But like I keep saying, it's a channel where I talk about movies and either way I'm talking about movies. So there you go. I have one more recap to do and then I am officially done. But please, as I have been saying with the other recap videos, if you have seen any of the movies that I have talked about in this video or any of my other recap videos, please comment down below, tell me what your takes are on those movies, and then also let me know if any of the films I have mentioned are new to you that you've, you know, maybe never heard of. But as always, thank you to my amazing patrons. If you are new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe. I am working on a lot of great fun content coming in the new year, so only way you're really going to be around for it is if you subscribe, but or not, completely up to you. Anyway, I'm off now, so until next time, bye!